All right, we're going to take a few minutes to review what we've done up to this point, and then go on, and we're going to move into where we're going to be talking about the project. All right, so we'll be talking about website design, and before we do that, we'll talk about the portfolio and a couple of other miscellaneous things. So today's sort of a potpourri of things, something old, something new, and we'll go from there. So let's look at the last example we had last time. We really have done a lot this semester. If you compare the web pages we did the first week of classes with the web pages we're doing now, we really have added a lot to them. We've gotten to the point where we can make some pretty nice looking web pages. Simple. We haven't gone over some of the more involved things yet, but still nice looking. The flip side of that is we now know enough to make some really ugly web pages. So one of our big topics that we'll consider next is how you can take what we've learned and apply it with good judgment and apply it with sort of a design sensibility so that the pages we make are good and not horrible. So let's look at one of these pages. All right, page we had last time. Some of the things that we did, we added images. We actually added images a couple different ways. One is that we put some images right on the page for them to be content to the page. Then we added a background image that's mainly just for decoration or aesthetic purposes. We have, through CSS, added different colors to the page. And we've done it in a purposeful way. In other words, we just didn't make random things different colors. We made the headings different colors, and that sort of serves the purpose of subdividing the page into different sections to make it easier for people to sort of get their head around what's on the page and so on. So, if we look at the HTML for this, we see that we have the same basic tags that we've been using for a while now. Dot type at the top. HTML tag goes around everything. There's a head section and a body section. Within the body section, there is a header section. We have several sections, which we could use section or we could use article. And we have a footer. And then within the footer we have headings, H2s, H1s. We have images, which we need the SRC attribute as well as the alt attribute. We have links that has the href attribute, and so on. The one thing that I see still confuses people is the idea of attributes, like the href attribute for the link. Let's look at the link a little closer. Notice that there's sort of three parts to the link. There's a beginning tag. And again, just like every other beginning tag, it starts with a less than sign and ends with a greater than sign, just like the H2 one does. The difference is the greater than sign is not right at the end of the A. there's a space, and then there's the href attribute, which specifies what page the link is a link to. If it's on someone else's server, it has to start with HTTP or HTTPS. And it is enclosed in quotes. So all of this is the starting tag, from there to there. So we don't close the starting tag right here. The end of the starting tag is there. All right? Now, the thing that people miss is the text for the link. All right? And the text of the link goes between the start and ending tag, just like the text for an H2 goes between the start and the ending tag for an H2. You need something between the start and ending tag of a link because that gives the user something to click on. Without that, they can't really access the link. All right, so you need the text between the starting and ending tag to give the user something to click on. Images are similar, except that images don't really have a separate ending tag. But the SRC attribute and the alt attribute are part of the image starting tag itself. We use a separate CSS file, and in that way we can share that CSS file among all our web pages. That helps guarantee a consistent look for our web pages. We want all our web pages to look similar. We don't want our web pages to look like they came from different sites. All right? If you notice, most every organization, if you look at their website, if you go from page to page, each page looks very similar to the other ones. The way it's set up, the color scheme, the font scheme, all that looks similar. So one of the ways that we can do that is by putting all our CSS code in its own file. There's only then one place to change it if we ever want to change it, and it will affect all the pages. Our CSS file consists of a set of style rules. And the style rules look like this. They have a selector. The selector determines what gets a style rule. So in this case, the header tag, everything inside the header tag gets a style rule. Body tag, section tag, H1 tag, H2 tag, footer. And then the one that's a little bit different is footer A. That means every A tag within the footer section. So we can fine tune. We don't have to say every A tag. We can say every A tag within the footer gets this style rule. The style rules are in these curly braces, and they consist of a attribute, a colon, and then the value, and then a semicolon. So width colon 600 px means the width of this is going to be 600 pixels. Yes?
Was that what you went over on Thursday?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Any questions about this? Yes.
Does it matter if there's a space between the margin, colon, and the 50px or not?
No.
Just leave it that way because it's easier to read?
Yeah.
Does it have to start with margin?
No. This is for this particular rule. Okay? This particular rule, we're talking about the margins. So we're going to say margin 500 pixels. We don't have to do anything with the margin, in which case we wouldn't need that there. If we didn't want to change the margin, we wouldn't put the margin in here. Remember that the browser has a certain default that says this is how the web page is going to be displayed. This CSS file is sort of overriding that. It's saying no. Normally the header goes across the entire page, but no, we don't want the header going across the entire page. We want it to be 600 pixels wide. So we only want it going over 2/3 of the page. And the margin, we want it to be 50 pixels on top, automatic on the right, 0 on the bottom, and automatic on the left. And the automatic part will cause it to be centered. Now, some people have observed there's more than one way to center something. That you can actually use a center tag, all right, to center things. I probably shouldn't have even said that, because if you didn't know that, that's good, because you shouldn't use the center tag. It's better to use CSS to change the way your page looks, because that makes it more flexible. If it's centered and I decide later I don't want it to be centered, I only need to change the CSS. And every page will stop being centered. Whereas if I have a center tag on every page, I'd have to go back and change every page. So CSS is a lot more flexible as far as changing things. You might ask, why is there a center tag then if we're not supposed to use it? It's just the way that websites and the language evolved. That before there was CSS, they put some things in HTML to allow you to lay out the page a certain way. Now, one thing to notice about this is, take for example margin. All right? Margin actually has 4 values to it. It has a top margin, a right margin, a bottom margin, and a left margin. I can either write them all out, or I can use the shorthand and just say margin and put all 4 of them in. So when you look things up, sometimes you'll see slightly different ways to put the style. So I could have said like this, margin dash top. Margin dash right. Margin dash left, margin dash bottom. I could have done it like that. So sometimes you can specify each little tiny part of the attribute, or you can use a shorthand and say, I just want to do all the margins. And I want it to be 50, automatic, 0, and automatic. We'll see that more and more. That, for example, with border. On the footer, I could say border width 2 pixels. Border color red. Border style solid. And I get that border down the bottom. All right. The shorthand way of doing that is I could just say border two pixels red solid. And it worked the same way. How does it work the same way? The browser's smart enough to know, well, red must be the color, right? Because red couldn't be the width. How wide do you want that footer? I want it to be red wide. That doesn't make any sense. So therefore, the browser is smart enough to understand that border, if I say red for the border, I'm talking about the color and not the width or the style. Likewise with solid, it's smart enough to understand that that is the type of border and 2 pixels is the width of the border. So we'll see that a lot where there's, for certain attributes, there's the long way and the short way to do it. Okay, questions about this? Next thing we're going to look at is the portfolio. Just to back up for 1 second. I think you can see that it's very easy to make a really ugly page because you can change every tag on the page literally and make it a different color. You can make it a different font. You can do all kinds of things. You can make it look like a ransom note if you wanted to. All right, but that's not particularly going to be very good. So one of the things that we're going to try to do is apply good judgment in the things that we change. So we're going to use color to sort of emphasize certain things, but we're not going to use a million colors. We're going to use a few colors. All right, and in that way, the things that we want to emphasize will get emphasized, right? If everything's a different color, then nothing gets emphasized, right? But if most of the things on the page are black and white, and a few things are a different color, then those few things naturally attract a little bit of attention. So we can use color, not just to make it look nice, but to help focus the attention on the way the page is set up and what we want the user to focus on. Okay, so we're going to talk now about the portfolio. Let's look at the portfolio assignment on Canvas. And I know you've all read this because I mentioned at the beginning of the semester to read this. That wasn't a joke. I was just going to see if anyone was going to laugh. All right. If you have not read this section on portfolio, read it in the next day or so and bring any questions you have to class on Thursday. What are we talking about when we say a portfolio? Well, a portfolio is a collection of your work. And portfolios are created for a number of purposes. All right? Sometimes portfolios are created within a school environment. And they do a couple things in a school environment. They help you see and take inventory of just everything that you've learned. Right? Sometimes when you get caught up in doing the assignments daily and day by day, you almost forget everything that you've learned. All right? Portfolios give you a chance to reflect back on what you've done in a course or in a program. And think about like, wow, I really liked what I did on this assignment. Or this assignment, I was a little rushed on and I didn't take my time and it could have been a little better had I done A, B, and C. So portfolios are useful for you to sort of look back on your education and reflect. Another reason that portfolios are created is to show off your work, especially to show off your work to prospective employers. All right? So you can actually, in fact, web developers do this, you can actually create your own website that will have your portfolio on it, and you can include that with your resume and cover letter when you go for a web development job. I talked to a number of different employers here. All right? And most of them, many of them, say one of the critical things that they're looking for in software developers or web developers are people that are really into it. People that would be working on this stuff even if it wasn't a classroom assignment. All right? People that go and volunteer and do a website for their local church or for a club or just create a fan site for something that they're interested in. All right? People that have a passion for it and create things even beyond the stuff that they're required to for the class. Having a good portfolio is one of those things that you can do because it can demonstrate the work that you've done in a very obvious way. All right? That's one advantage that web developers have over people in other areas, right? If you were a nursing student, let's say, you couldn't say, well, until I get a job as a nurse, I'm going to start my own little hospital here and take care of sick people and then document it. All right? If you were a nuclear engineer, you can't say, well, until a nuclear power plant hires me, I'm going to run my own power plant in my backyard. And probably none of those are probably good ideas. But as a web developer, you can say, well, I don't have a job as a web developer yet, but I can still show that I can make websites, because I have. Because it's not that hard to put a site up on the web. All right? Let's look at some examples of portfolios for web developers. So I'm going to just Google web developer portfolio. All right? Now, these are kind of, high-end ones. But, again, and we might not be here at this point, but you got to walk before you can run. So you can start thinking in these terms. Here's some examples of web portfolios that are meant to inspire you. Okay? Tells you what this person does. Tells you a little bit about their job history. Tells you some of the things that they do. And some examples of their work. All right. So imagine if you were looking for someone to do some work for you, to compare seeing a resume just on a sheet of paper versus a resume that had a link to their portfolio, where you can actually go and see examples of their work. So instead of them describing, I did a website for the Arctic Whitehorse Games, Arctic Winter Games, and it came out nice. Instead of saying that on a resume, you can actually go visit it and see how it was set up, what it looks like, and so on. similar to a resume in that it gives you an idea of what kind of jobs a person is interested in, what their background is, what their work experience is. But it's definitely something that comes more to life than a plain old resume. And again, this shows examples of the work that the person has done. And you could include some comments about like what the project was about and so on. Okay. So the portfolio in this class is done for two reasons. One, to give you an opportunity to look back on your work and sort of self-critique it. All right? Think about how you could have done it better. Or maybe not. Maybe just reflect on how proud you are of the work that you've done. It's okay to do that, right? The second thing is to sort of prepare you for possibly making a portfolio that you can publish out on the web and showcase your work to help you get jobs, or get clients if you decide to like do a freelance thing. Okay, so you need to get a copy. You need to have a copy of each assignment. So I hope you've kept a copy of your assignment. I hope you do that anyhow in all your classes. All right, if you turn something in, keep a copy. Thumb drives are really inexpensive, despite the fact that for the first 3 weeks I didn't have a thumb drive on me and I had to borrow one off a student every time, all right? That was mainly because the lines in the bookstore were too long for me to walk over there and get one. But now things have calmed down over there. So you can walk over, have one for less than $10. That's like 8 gig, all right? So storage space is cheap. So keep a copy of all your assignments. If for whatever reason you have not kept a copy of your assignment, you can download it from the Dropbox. So all is not lost. But just as a word of advice, I would do this in all my classes, even if there was not a portfolio. So what you need to do is you need to take and you need to assemble your portfolio in a form, in a certain form. And I'm going to suggest the form to do it in, and I'm going to kind of show you how to do it. All right? You're going to turn in the portfolio in two sections. March 11th, which is actually coming up, about a month away, you're going to turn in part 1 of the portfolio, which will have all your assignments up to that point. I think there'll be 5 or 6 assignments. And then at the end of the semester, you'll turn in with the rest of the assignments. Let's see if I have an example of the portfolio. Yes?
So like each lab that we've done will go into the portfolio?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. Here, I think this is the example I used last semester, or 2 semesters ago. Now here is the suggested way that I do it, all right? That you do it, rather. And this will make your life easier, all right? And it also teaches you some things that you need to learn anyhow. So this is a good thing to do. Notice what I have. I have in this folder for my portfolio, I have a single web page called Index. All right? When you're making a website, it's good if your first page is called one of a set of certain standard things, and index.html is one of the good names to use for your home page. All right? Because most web servers by default look for index.html as your home page. So I have in this folder my index, which is my portfolio home page, and I have the CSS for it. I then have a folder for each of the assignments. Now, I was lazy, I only did 2 assignments. But when you see how this is done, you'll see that if you do 2, you could do 10, right? You just repeat this as many times as you need to. So, I have 2 assignments in mind. Yours, the first time you turn it in, you'll probably have 5 or 6 assignments in there. And then the last time you turn it in, you'll have 10 or 11 or 12, however many. All right. I've included what's called Greek text. Have we talked about Greek text in this class? It's just sort of a filler. It's just sort of a placeholder. So this doesn't mean that you can turn it in with Greek text. You need to turn it in with actual words. All right? But in this case, you're going to have your header that's going to say whatever your name is, probably Web Development Portfolio. And then you're going to have a little introduction of yourself and an overview of your class experience. So write just a short paragraph or 2 that talks about, this is my first experience, this class is my first experience with web development. This class is me getting back into web development after being away for 5 or 6 years. I've been a self-taught web developer for 8 years, but I wanted to learn some of the things that maybe I missed by teaching myself. Whatever. So summarize sort of your experience with web development, your experiences about the class, and so on. You'll then have a section for each lab. And the section for each lab will have your observations about the lab. Gee, lab 1 was very easy because I've done this before and we didn't do anything terribly exciting in it, so I finished it in about 15 minutes. Lab 2, oh, that one was a little harder because I've never worked with CSS before, but it's great that I learned how you can use CSS because it's so much easier and more flexible than using HTML to change the appearance of the page, and so on. Now keep in mind, I didn't go all out on this layout here. All right? If this portfolio is going to be used to market you to potential employers, you want to show off your skills. So you want to make this look as good as you possibly can. You can include background images, you can include images. If you notice those portfolios, those example portfolios that I showed, they weren't terribly formal, all right? In other words, some of them had like little cartoon images of them. It wasn't like done in a formal tone like a resume or a cover letter typically is. It was done in a more casual, conversational sort of tone. The way that if you met someone, they might talk about what they do. Then we have the links to the different pages. So here is Lab 1. If I click on it, it will take me over to a lab. I then have a link back to the portfolio. So I have my portfolio homepage, I have a link to each lab, and then each lab has a link back to the portfolio homepage.
Now, obviously, when you first turned in the lab, you didn't have a link back to your portfolio page. But you could go and add those now. And you could just add them to be simple, just add them at the very top of the page, back to Portfolio Home. All right, that'll make it easy for me to figure out what I need to click on to go back to the portfolio. So notice how with this, I could go to every page of my portfolio and back once I start out from the Portfolio Home page. So I load up the Portfolio Home, I click on there's Lab 2, I can look at everything in Lab 2. Oh, that's how I get back to the Portfolio Home page. Here's Lab 1. Let me click on that. Oh, here's Lab 1. Let me go back to the Portfolio Home. All right? Now, I don't actually have your lab with 1 and 2. I just have 2 different web pages I developed as examples here. But you'll actually have your Lab 1, your Lab 2, your Lab 3, and Lab 4. For simplicity, if you have multiple web pages, because some of the web assignments, some of the assignments, especially the ones coming up, you'll create more than one web page. You only need to link to one of the web pages, and you only need to link back from one of the web pages. So if Lab, I think 3 or 4 has 2 web pages in it, you don't need to link to every one of the pages for Lab 3 or 4. Just link to the main page and have that page linked back to the portfolio. Does that make sense? All right. Now, the one thing that's different about this is that we have stuff organized into folders, right? It makes perfect sense to do that for the portfolio, right? Because that way, what you do for one assignment doesn't interfere with what you do for another assignment. You keep all the pages sort of self-contained. All the labs self-contained. But that means that we're going to have to change the rules that we've been using as far as creating links. All right? Because remember, before I said if you create a link to another page, if they were in the same folder, all you need to do is put the page name. But these aren't in the same folder. So I have to do more than that. I have to put the folder name and then the name of the page. So let's look at index.html. Here's my link to Lab 1. And the name of the page is spring.html. I can't just put spring.html. What happens if I do that? Tells me that file doesn't exist. Why doesn't that file exist? Because spring.html is not in the same folder as this web page. So I can't just say spring.html. Spring.html is in the folder underneath this web page called Lab 1. So therefore, to get the link to work, I have to put lab1 / spring.html. Notice that this is a forward slash. All right? In some of your classes, like the operating system class, when you use Windows, you will use a backslash if you're on Windows. You will use a forward slash if you're on Unix or Linux. That's not the case in web development. In web development, you always use a forward slash to designate a directory. All right? So it doesn't matter that you're on Windows. You don't use a backslash. You always use a forward slash. So, in other words, what this says is the page I want to link to is in a subfolder called Lab 1, and its name is spring.html. If there were more folders, I'd just include them with a slash. Lab1 / pages / spring.html. So I just put a list of the folders, the path of how to get to this page from my current page. And how do I get to this page from my current page? I have to first go down to Lab 1 subfolder, and then I go to the page spring.html. So that's how you go down folders. And it works again. Now, how do you go up folders? Up folders is a little different. All right? It's a little different for this reason. If you look at the folders or the directories, folders and directories are pretty much the same thing. If you look up, it's sort of a tree or a hierarchy. If this is my, we'll call it my root folder, this is where my portfolio homepage is. And I want to link to these different pages. As I'm going down this tree, a folder can have multiple children folders underneath it, multiple subfolders, multiple child folders underneath it. Because underneath my root folder here, I could have Lab 1, Lab 2, Lab 3, Lab 4, and so on. So if I want page 1 out of Lab 2, I can't simply say I want page 1 that's in a subfolder, because there could be a page 1 in each of the subfolders. I have to specify the subfolder / page1.html. So, if I wanted a link to this page, and I was in this page, my link would be like this. Right? So that the browser would know to go to this one, not to this one, or that one, or that one, or that one. Now, when you're moving the opposite direction, each child folder only has one parent. So, from here to get up to there, I don't have to know the name of this folder. I just have to say, I want a link to index.html that lives in my folder's parent folder, the folder above it, and this. So, multiple children, so you have to give the name of the child, only one parent, so you just have to say, go to my parent folder. The way that you go to the parent folder is with a ... So, if I wanted to create a link from this page back up to this page, I would say ahref ... index.html. And it's no different if there's more, right? If there was a pages folder, if I was going down, I'd list all the directories. Lab 1 / pages / file name. And if I was going up, I'd say ... / file name. So ... takes you up one level. The name of the child takes you down one level. You could even link from this page to this page if you wanted to by saying first you go up, ... and then you go down to the page 2. So to link from here to here, you'd say href equals ... /lab2 / page1.html. So let's look at my example code. So sure enough, in my index.html, the link for this page is lab1/spring.html. The link to this other page is lab2 spring.html. So that will go from this folder down to lab1, or this folder down to lab2. Now, to go up to the portfolio's home page, notice the link is /index.html. That takes you back up to the portfolio's home page, because we're in this folder. We want to go up to that folder's parent folder and then use that as the file name that you want to go to. So, this is called relative address, because it's all based relative to the page that you're putting the link on. So if you want to go down to a subfolder, you use the subfolder name /file name. If you want to go up to the parent folder, you use .. and the file name. This works, by the way, the same way if there are images. A lot of times you'll put images in their own folder. All right? You'll put images in the folder. And then to get down to the image, if there was an images folder, instead of saying image source equals crocus.jpg, you'd say images /crocus.jpg if it was in an images subfolder. All right. This is pretty much what you need to know for the portfolio. Make it yours. Make it to reflect your personality. All right? And showcase your work. I'm just showing you what needs to be in the portfolio. The way it looks should be up to you. And remember, it's an opportunity for you to showcase your skills and to make it personal. All right? Your portfolio shouldn't look like the portfolio of the person next to you. All right? Especially the home page. Right? Because you want it to really showcase your own work and your own personality and to be personal for you. If you have more questions, I'll be happy to talk about them in lab. It's not too early to start working on this. It's only due the first pass is due in about a month. You can sort of save yourself some trouble if you ever get to where like you've turned in all the lab assignments and you're bored and you're looking for something to do. Make your portfolio. Then you won't be on March 10th putting together all these files. You'll just, every time you complete assignment, just add it to your portfolio. And then on March 11th, you'll just be ready to turn it in. All right, we'll see you over in lab.